John Magufuli, the bulldozer president who shook Africa. From chemistry teacher to commander-in-chief vertical bar, the story you never heard. The enigma of Magufuli. It was the 17th of March, 2021, when the Tanzanian government made an announcement that stunned the world. President John Pombe Magufuli was dead. At 61, the self-styled bulldozer had vanished from the public eye for nearly 3 weeks. Rumors had been swirling. Some said he had COVID-19, others claimed he'd gone into hiding due to internal political battles. Then came the bombshell. He had died of heart complications, officials said. But for many, questions lingered. Why the secrecy? Why the delayed announcement? Why did the man who once declared Tanzania COVID-free by the grace of God suddenly disappear? John Magufuli's death was as dramatic and mysterious as his life. He was not your typical African leader. He didn't care for Western approval. He didn't lavish himself with presidential luxury. He didn't travel unnecessarily, and he publicly shamed ministers who did. He was, to some, a patriot, to others, a populist with an authoritarian streak. But beyond the headlines, both admiring and accusatorially, is a far deeper, more complex figure. A man shaped by hardship, a devout Catholic, a trained chemist, a rural boy who rose from the dusty classrooms of Chato to become the most controversial leader Tanzania had seen in decades. In this documentary, we dive deep into the journey of John Pombe Magufuli, from his humble beginnings through his meteoric political rise to the thunderous presidency that redefined Tanzania and ended just as mysteriously as it began. This is the story you've never heard. Humble beginnings in Chato. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli was born on the 29th of October 1959 in Chato, a small town in Tanzania's northwest, near the shores of Lake Victoria. At the time, Chato was little more than a rural village, no running water, no paved roads, and certainly no clue that it would one day raise a president. His parents were poor. His father, Joseph Magufuli, was a peasant farmer and also worked as a watchman for a local Catholic mission. His mother was a homemaker. The family lived a modest life, growing their own food and surviving largely on subsistence farming. It was a humble, disciplined upbringing, one that would later define Magufuli's famously frugal style. As a boy, Magufuli was known for being serious, disciplined, and highly intelligent. He excelled in school, often walking several kilometers every day to attend classes. At a time when many children in his area dropped out of school to help their families in the fields, Magufuli stayed the course, driven by what he later called a divine calling to serve the people. He attended Chato Primary School and then moved on to Katoke Seminary School in Biharamulo for his secondary education. There, he briefly considered becoming a priest, a reflection of his deep-rooted Catholic faith. But life had other plans. After his O-levels and A-levels, he enrolled at the University of Dar es Salaam, where he studied chemistry and mathematics. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Education in 1988. Later, he would earn a master's degree and even a PhD in chemistry from the same university, a rare feat for a politician in the region. During his university years, Magufuli wasn't politically loud. He wasn't a firebrand. He was bookish, reserved, and highly respected for his academic rigor. But it was also during this time that he developed a sharp sense of national duty inspired by Tanzania's founding father, Julius Nyerere. He admired Nyerere's ideas of African socialism, self-reliance, and national pride. Yet he also recognized the limitations of those ideals when taken too far. He wanted a practical version of leadership, efficient, results-driven, less talk, more action. After graduating, Magufuli returned to Chato not as a politician but as a chemistry teacher at Sengerema Secondary School. He taught for a few years before joining Nyanza Cooperative Union as an industrial chemist. But by the early 1990s, Tanzania was changing. The ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi (CCM), was grappling with economic reforms and multi-party democracy. A new generation of leaders was needed. And Magufuli, the quiet, precise, and no-nonsense chemist, was about to enter the game. The chemist enters politics. In 1995, John Pombe Magufuli took a leap that would change not only his life, but the destiny of an entire nation. The same man who had spent years in classrooms teaching chemistry, the one who knew factories and chemical labs more intimately than campaign slogans, decided to enter Tanzanian politics. He joined Chama cha Mapinduzi (CCM), the long dominant ruling party of Tanzania, under which he contested for a seat in parliament for Chato constituency, his hometown. Many thought he didn't stand a chance. He wasn't a seasoned politician, had no deep-pocketed backers, and his campaign lacked the flashy events others used to attract crowds. But what he did have was relatability. He walked from village to village, spoke in simple Swahili, promised roads, water, and schools. He wasn't a man of charisma, but of conviction. The people of Chato believed him, and they voted for him. In 1995, Magufuli won his first parliamentary seat, and almost immediately, President Benjamin Mkapa appointed him as the Deputy Minister of Works. At the Ministry of Works, Magufuli earned a nickname that would follow him the rest of his life: the bulldozer. Why? Because of his relentless obsession with roads, infrastructure, and accountability. He was known to storm construction sites unannounced, firing contractors on the spot if they failed to meet deadlines or used substandard materials. His style was direct, sometimes brutal, but effective. Unlike many politicians, he didn't just sit in his office reading reports. He got dirty literally visiting roadworks in gumboots. When Mkapa was re-elected in 2000, he promoted Magufuli to full Minister of Works. It was here that Magufuli truly flourished as a public servant. In a country notorious for corruption and bureaucratic inefficiency, Magufuli was a strange outlier, a man who rejected bribery and demanded results. It didn't take long for the public to notice. Tanzanians began seeing real change: roads being paved, bridges constructed, delays reduced. His popularity surged, rise through the ranks. As the years went on, Magufuli's star continued to rise. Under President Jakaya Kikwete, who took office in 2005, Magufuli was reshuffled across various ministries. Minister of Lands and Human Settlements Development, 2006-2008. Minister of Livestock and Fisheries, 2008-2010. And finally back to Minister of Works, 2010-2015. In each of these ministries, Magufuli left a strong imprint. While other ministers were criticized for inefficiency or lavish spending, Magufuli became known for his frugality and hands-on style. But it wasn't just his work ethic that made him stand out. It was also his anti-corruption posture. In a government where corruption scandals frequently surfaced, Magufuli remained untarnished. He refused bribes, he lived modestly, he rejected official convoys and expensive allowances. While some dismissed him as overly rigid, to the average Tanzanian, he represented hope. Still, he was never seen as a frontrunner for the presidency. That changed in 2015. When the CCM was preparing for its presidential primaries ahead of the 2015 election, the race was dominated by political heavyweights, wealthy businessmen, seasoned ministers, and those closely allied with President Kikwete's inner circle. Magufuli was not among the favorites. In fact, his entry into the race surprised many. He was considered too strict, too raw, not politically suave. But behind the scenes, there was growing momentum for a different kind of leader, one unafraid to confront Tanzania's ballooning debt, rising corruption, and public distrust. Magufuli's simple campaign slogan "Hapa Kazi Tu," which translates to nothing but work, resonated with ordinary Tanzanians. While others talked politics, he talked jobs. While others threw elaborate rallies, he promised to cut unnecessary spending. And while others blamed past regimes, Magufuli focused on solutions. In a stunning upset, he won the CCM nomination in July 2015. That was just the beginning. In the October 2015 general election, Magufuli faced Chadema candidate Edward Lowassa, a former prime minister who had defected from CCM. The campaign was tense, closely watched, and at times chaotic. But Magufuli's messaging of discipline, reform, and hard work carried the day. He won with 58% of the vote and was sworn in as the 5th president of Tanzania on November 5, 2015. His inauguration speech was brief but powerful. Tanzania is not poor. Tanzania is rich. What we lack is good management. And with that, the bulldozer was now in full command of the machine. The bulldozer president. From the very first week in office, John Pombe Magufuli made it clear his presidency would not be business as usual. Before his ministers could even settle into their offices, Magufuli was already cracking the whip. He cancelled the lavish Independence Day celebrations and redirected the funds, about 1 million, to build a road for a hospital in Dar es Salaam. Instead of a parade, he organized a national cleanup day, grabbing a broom himself and sweeping litter alongside regular citizens. The message was unmistakable: this president works, and so should you. Cutting waste. Magufuli's first budget as president cut government travel expenses by 90%. He reduced the number of foreign trips for officials and banned first-class flights for ministers. Government meetings that used to be held in expensive hotels were relocated to public offices. Allowances were slashed. Lavish state dinners cancelled. There was no room for extravagance in Magufuli's Tanzania. He declared war on ghost workers, thousands of government employees who existed only on paper but collected salaries. His audit revealed over 10 zero ghost workers, and their removal saved the country billions of Tanzanian shillings. He also tackled tax evasion, corruption, and customs fraud. The Tanzania Revenue Authority was empowered, and a sense of fear and accountability began spreading through public offices. To the ordinary Tanzanian, Magufuli was a breath of fresh air. Finally, a leader who lived modestly, worked tirelessly, and refused to play the game of political favors. The mega projects begin. Magufuli believed in big visible development projects. He wanted roads, rails, dams, and ports. His signature projects included the Standard Gauge Railway, SGR, a modern rail line to connect Dar es Salaam to neighboring countries. The Julius Nyerere hydropower project, one of Africa's largest dams built on the Rufiji River. Revamping Air Tanzania. Buying new aircraft and reviving the national airline. Upgrading healthcare and education infrastructure. To fund these projects, he avoided foreign loans whenever possible and insisted on local financing. He was proud that Tanzania was funding its own dam without heavy reliance on the IMF or World Bank. At the same time, Magufuli started reining in foreign mining companies. He accused multinationals of underreporting exports, avoiding taxes, and cheating the country of its mineral wealth. In 2017, he slapped a massive tax bill on Acacia Mining, a subsidiary of Barrick Gold, claiming they owed Tanzania 190 billion in unpaid taxes. It was an unprecedented move in East Africa. The confrontation shocked the global investment community, but many Tanzanians applauded. Magufuli was standing up to powerful Western companies, demanding respect and fair treatment. Tanzania was no longer a pushover, reformer, or tyrant. But for all his bold reforms, John Magufuli's leadership also began showing an authoritarian edge, one that drew criticism both locally and internationally. The crackdown on dissent. As the government pursued economic discipline, it also tightened political space. Journalists, opposition leaders, bloggers, and even ordinary citizens began feeling the chill of a new political order. In 2016, Magufuli's government banned political rallies outside election seasons, effectively silencing opposition parties between elections. Opposition politicians, including Chadema leader Tundu Lissu, were repeatedly harassed, arrested, or barred from holding meetings. The media didn't fare much better. Several newspapers were shut down for publishing false information. Online content creators were required to pay hefty registration fees. Bloggers, podcasters, and YouTubers were silenced or forced into self-censorship. In 2017, Tundu Lissu, one of the president's fiercest critics, was shot 16 times outside his residence. He survived, but the attack shocked the nation. To date, no one has been held accountable. Magufuli publicly condemned the attack but said little about investigations. Critics accused his government of fostering an environment of impunity, reproductive rights, and gender issues. In 2017, Magufuli made international headlines and drew outrage when he banned pregnant schoolgirls from returning to school. He argued that allowing them back would encourage immorality and that schools were not places for mothers. Women's rights groups condemned the decision as cruel and outdated. Magufuli was unapologetic. To him, discipline and moral order were non-negotiable, even if it came at the cost of opportunity. Religious and press relations. Despite being a devout Catholic, Magufuli did not shy away from asserting state control over religious institutions. He warned clerics to stay out of politics and criticized churches that preached against government policies. This further alienated a section of the population, especially as some religious leaders began to speak out against growing authoritarianism. By 2019, Tanzania's international image had shifted dramatically. Once praised for its democratic institutions and peaceful transitions of power, it was now being described as increasingly repressive. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and even the United Nations voiced concern over the shrinking civic space in Tanzania. But none of this seemed to faze Magufuli. To his supporters, he was restoring discipline and national pride. To his critics, he was dismantling the very democratic freedoms Tanzania had built for decades. The COVID gamble. In 2020, as the world reeled from the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, leaders across the globe scrambled to shut down economies, enforce lockdowns, and procure vaccines. John Magufuli chose a radically different path. At first, the Tanzanian government followed World Health Organization (WHO) guidance. It implemented basic hygiene protocols and announced public health measures. But within weeks, Magufuli began to voice skepticism. He claimed the tests being used to detect COVID-19 were faulty, famously stating that samples taken from a goat, pawpaw, papaya, and a quail tested positive, leading him to suspend testing altogether. He questioned the efficacy of face masks, lockdowns, and social distancing. Instead of science, he called for national prayer. Coronavirus is the devil, and it cannot survive in the body of Jesus Christ, he told the public. We have defeated many enemies before, and we will defeat this one through prayer and fasting. Churches and mosques remained open. Public gatherings were not banned. Life in Tanzania carried on as if the pandemic barely existed. He also refused to close borders or accept international vaccines, calling them part of a Western plot. He discouraged Tanzanians from being used as guinea pigs for unproven drugs and emphasized natural healing remedies including steam inhalation and herbal cures. Global alarm. The international community watched in shock. While other countries reported cases and deaths daily, Tanzania stopped publishing COVID data in May 2020. Journalists who reported on COVID deaths were silenced. Doctors who spoke out were threatened or arrested. Despite mounting reports of hospitals being overwhelmed and graves being dug in secret, the government insisted everything was under control. When neighboring Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda implemented curfews and lockdowns, Tanzania stayed open. Tourists flocked to Zanzibar. Sports events continued. Life seemed normal, but beneath the surface, fear was growing. Diplomatic missions, including the US Embassy in Dar es Salaam, issued alerts about COVID spikes in Tanzania. The WHO pleaded with the country to follow science, but Magufuli held firm. Vaccines are not for us, he said in early 2021. We will depend on God. To some, this was heroic defiance. To others, it was deadly denialism. In the fall, in February 2021, something strange began happening. President John Magufuli, usually active in the media and known for making surprise public appearances, suddenly disappeared from public view. For over 2 weeks, he was nowhere to be seen. Rumors exploded on social media. Some said he was hospitalized in Kenya. Others claimed he had been flown to India. Opposition figures began speculating that he had contracted COVID-19 and was in critical condition. Government officials denied everything. He is healthy and working hard, said Vice President Samia Suluhu Hassan on March 12. People should not listen to rumors. But just 4 days later, on the evening of March 17, 2021, Tanzanians were hit with an announcement that would shock the entire continent. Samia Suluhu appeared on national television and, with a steady but emotional voice, declared, "It is with deep sorrow that I inform you that our beloved President, John Pombe Magufuli, has passed away today. The official cause of death? Heart complications?" But not everyone believed it. Opposition leaders insisted he had died of COVID-19, the very disease he had spent a year denying. Some even claimed he had been dead for days before the announcement. The secrecy surrounding his illness, the swift burial arrangements, and the tight control of information only fueled conspiracy theories. Regardless of the true cause, one fact was undeniable. The bulldozer was gone, and Tanzania and Africa would never be the same. His body was displayed in a national tour, mourned by millions who lined up along highways and stadiums to bid farewell. But even in death, Magufuli remained a polarizing figure. Legacy. John Pombe Magufuli left behind a complex and controversial legacy. To his supporters, he was a patriot, a reformer, and a symbol of African strength, a leader who refused to bow to Western pressure, who cut corruption, and who prioritized national dignity over global approval. He modernized Tanzania's infrastructure, reined in public spending, and brought a sense of discipline to government. His Hapa Kazi Tu, nothing but work, mantra transformed public expectations of leadership. Under his rule, civil servants reported to work on time. Ghost workers were eliminated. Roads, bridges, and railways were built. The mining sector was reclaimed from exploitative companies. Public finances were stabilized. He was beloved by many Tanzanians, especially in rural areas, who finally saw their villages connected to electricity, water, and paved roads. But there was a dark side. His regime also weakened democratic institutions. Opposition parties were crushed. Journalists were censored. Civil liberties were curtailed. Pregnant girls were banned from school. COVID-19 was denied and likely killed thousands silently. Magufuli was both admired and feared, loved and hated, praised and criticized. His vice president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, succeeded him, becoming Tanzania's first female president. Almost immediately, she reversed many of Magufuli's most controversial policies, re-engaging with the international community, resuming COVID data reporting, and reopening media spaces. In a way, her presidency marked a soft undoing of the bulldozer's rule. But even she acknowledged his achievements. He taught us to be bold. He taught us to be accountable. He reminded us that Africa must rise. Who was John Magufuli? Was John Magufuli a dictator in disguise or a disciplined reformer? Was he a dangerous populist or a true nationalist? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. He was a man of contradictions, deeply religious, fiercely nationalistic, obsessively efficient, but intolerant of opposition. He didn't steal. He didn't live lavishly. He didn't care much for diplomacy or elite approval. But he also didn't tolerate dissent, and his denial of science cost lives. In the end, he left the world the same way he ruled it, unexpectedly, controversially, and unforgettably. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli, the man from Chato, the teacher, the chemist, the road builder, the president, now belongs to history. How he will be remembered depends on who you ask. But one thing is certain: he was a force. And in Africa, forces like that don't come often.